Good call. Yes.
Welcome back to another live podcast. I am your host, Emily Bose, and I'm so excited to be joined by Jason Sansusi, who has many interesting and incredible interests and expertise that we're going to dive into just a portion of on the show today. Jason, thanks so much for being with me.
Really my pleasure, Emily. I'm so glad that you reached out. I actually really enjoyed the conversation that you had with Tony Drummond. So been looking forward to connecting. So thanks for joining.
Awesome.
Thanks for letting me on the show.
Of course. No, my pleasure. And Tony was an amazing guest. If you are tuning in, you haven't seen her episode, please go check that out. I actually have been able to talk to so many amazing people from the drone industry, and I'm sure we'll reference a few of those as we go. If you have any questions for Jason as we're chatting, feel free to drop them in the comments and we'll try to get to them as we have time. But Jason, you've worn a lot of hats. You are an Air Force veteran. You're a remote sensing scientist, which would be fun for you to maybe tell us at some point what that actually means. A drone strategist, and then I know you're a co-founder of Neurodiversity Works, and that's a big piece of what we wanted to talk about today. Was on the show we like to talk about underrepresented groups, and there's not many that could use more attention than the neurodiverse community. So would love to hear how you ended up just starting that organization and a little bit of what you do with it.
Happy to answer that question. So this answer always starts with we. So we is my co-founder and I, who also happens to be my wife, Nicole Corder. She has been a neurodiverse. She has a profoundly autistic son, my stepson. His name's Blake. He's amazing. He's 14. And I didn't really know too much, honestly, about neurodiversity or even the word neurodiversity before 6 years ago, or much about the autism spectrum at all. And nor did I know I was on it, to be clear and fully transparent. We started because we saw a gap, right? We saw a gap, a significant gap, an underrepresentation of neurodiverse and talent in STEM fields primarily, but also in emerging industries like drone technology. However, it's funny because I've been in this industry for 15 years. And every time I go to a conference, I can tell now I am surrounded by my people. And most don't know, and that's okay. I had the extreme privilege of being able to be formally diagnosed. It has changed my perspective. We'll talk about that as well. So my diverse background with my experience as someone on, I guess I didn't know that then, but someone on the autism spectrum, my wife's experience with her son and with that community, we decided to sort of put those two worlds together. And we saw an opportunity within the drone industry that it was kind of a low bar, and saw as an opportunity of, let's use that as an entry point, because a lot of our students and a lot of people, they don't necessarily want to go back to school. They don't want to go to college. They just want a good job, skilled trade, right? Which is kind of the topic we're talking about.
Yep.
Get them to pass their Part 107, right? Step one. Give them some foundational training and help just bridge and create pathways. And, people ask what neurodiversity is all the time. Really it's just individuals with autism, ADHD, and other sort of neuro variations. And there's a lot of things under that umbrella. They do not necessarily have to be formally diagnosed, but people, like I said, ADHD, autism, neurodiversity is kind of a big hot topic right now. Our goal is to help them achieve meaningful careers.
That's fantastic. And I feel like autism in particular, I think, is such a spectrum. Like you were saying, you are probably on the very high functioning end of that spectrum, given everything that you've been able to accomplish. How have you found, and I know this is a little departure from what we were planning to get into, but what kind of opportunities have you found as you're kind of, working with folks that may fall in different places? Because obviously some folks that are going to be much further along that spectrum are going to need significant care or not necessarily be able to be in a position to work. And then you're going to have people in the middle that are going to have, levels of just functioning slightly differently, not necessarily less intelligent. Most of the autistic folks I've worked with are actually brilliant, just function, process, communicate a little bit differently than your
So let me do a
typical.
quick correction.
Please. I'm
So
more
a lot of
asking than
people
telling.
have been seeing autism as, obviously it is a spectrum. The spectrum isn't necessarily about function. It's about level of support needed. So it's different, right? So like the high functioning, low functioning
Right.
is not correct. It's what level of support do you need? So the
Mm,
DSM-5 actually, which is the rubric that
yep.
helps all of these things be diagnosed, defines them as level of support. So what does that mean? So there's
Okay.
different levels of support. So it's like, hey, you know what? I'm ASD level 1. So autism spectrum disorder level 1, low to zero to low support needs. Now that goes up to high support needs. Now these are people that may or may not need to be in facility schools,
Right.
working, in so it's not about what they're capable of. It's not about function. It's about
Mm-hmm.
level of support. How much support do they need? And I know we're going to get into this question later on, but I wanted to make that quick correction because it is
Yeah.
not about function. It is all about support. So it's a two-sided conversation with an employer and individual about what is that support structure that makes that work. So we'll talk about that.
I so appreciate you making that correction. And I think that's a phenomenal way to think about it because I have multiple family members that would be on the low support needed end of that, but have needed various, accommodations or support at certain
Mhm.
points in their life that set them up to then not need as much later. And then, have worked with folks that definitely needed more support. And then again, somewhere in the middle. So, but you're right. I think the point I was trying to make clumsily is that it's not, I totally agree with you that it's not a matter of not being intelligent or not having, capacity for things, that there's actually um, a pretty profound way that I've found at least the kids that I've worked with in the past that were autistic viewed the world that was just slightly different than the way I viewed it. That was amazing and like brought so much color and creativity and just a different way of perceiving things that was actually really brilliant and I found really thought provoking. So yes, no disrespect meant there, and I really really appreciate you making that correction because
None
I think it's
taken.
important that we talk about it in the
Yeah,
right way.
absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's super important. Well, we'll dive into a bit more around kind of the workforce side, but why don't we talk about what you were just addressing? Like, what are some of the specific strengths that you feel like neurodiverse individuals can bring in that are an advantage that they might possess to join operations? And obviously, we're talking stereotypically, like, I know this community is not a monolith and not everyone's going to be the same, but on a broad spectrum, say are some of the things that are unique strengths that can be um, brought in by hiring some folks from that community.
I feel like we could play a drinking game around the word spectrum. Um, so
I'm sure we
look,
could with bourbon, of course.
with bourbon, obviously. Inside
Obviously,
joke. So
yeah.
look, neurodiverse individuals, like you said, they, however, often possess, exceptional attention to detail, pattern recognition skills, and one of the best things is a perspective to a unique ability to think outside the box. Now, look,
Hmm.
these are invaluable, especially in drone operations. Like innovative problem solving, um, adherence to standards, checklists, precision, an analytical mindset. These are all critical for success, right? So, I mean, I think those being overly generalized, the thing that's really interesting about, especially autism specifically,
Mm.
is there's typically a hyper focus on something, a topic.
Hmm.
My stepson, it's tracking
Mm.
anything, DoorDash, packages, planes, anything, trains. If you can track it, he's in 100%, 24/7, 365. He will track things. He will be a wonderful logistician one day. So understanding what that is, and then building a program or building supports and they call them wraparound supports around that individual that makes use of those hyper focus areas, right? So for me, let's just say my wife tells me to shut up about drones at least once a day. And I get it. Like, so it's something that I'm passionate about. I mean, clearly, right? I'm very passionate about it. The thing that's interesting is it also brings up a challenge. That challenge is there's some other things that I'm not as good at, right? And those things and I may be sort of blind to those things. So you really need those wraparound supports to identify where you are strong and where you are, honestly, where you are struggling. So, and that could be across anyone, but specifically neurodiverse individuals possess that type of characteristic, which is not universal, right? If you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person, as everyone always says.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that intense focus, understanding what that is and harnessing that into a strength that can then be utilized in a workforce setting is a great way to think about creating an avenue for folks that may otherwise not have had one, and being able, probably having folks like yourself that can think outside the box in an industry that is also a little bit more open to new things, new ideas in the drone space. I feel like because it is kind of a new frontier, it's probably also a little bit of wild, wild west. So there's a little bit of room for creativity and trying new things that, in maybe more established, heavily structured industries like aviation, typical aviation, classic, traditional aviation, you might not have as much room for that because it is so heavily structured for good reason, right? You're trying to be safe, but I think that makes it a little more challenging to then be creative with some of the ways that you can bring people in.
Well, I think that structure, honestly, is something that is a welcome blessing to neurodiverse individuals, right? That structure, like I live and die by structure. I know that my stepson live and die by schedule, structure, repetitive, like all of those things. I was able to do very well at the Air Force Academy because that structure was there. I think if I would have went to a normal school, like a normal college, like I was planning on doing if I didn't get in, I don't think I would have done as well. I think I would have struggled a lot.
That's interesting.
I think I would have. That structure, I think, saved me, honestly. So I think the structure of an aviation program, now, trust me, drones are aviation. They are not toys. They are tools of the aviation industry under all of the umbrella of the FAA, right? That regulation fully, guides what we're able to do, how we do it. So that adherence to standards, that predictability, that is huge. Like that structure, I think, is huge for this population because it allows them to thrive.
That's such a great point. And I'm sure Michelle, Duquette, and, Tony and some of the other great folks I've had on would not appreciate my characterization of the drone industry. I'm very excited about things that are coming with drones, especially after my conversations with so many folks from the field. How have you, just staying in this vein of kind of the workforce development, finding these career paths for folks, I think you kind of touched on this already, but that background from the Air Force Academy, military service obviously is highly structured. How have those things impacted, or your experience with those things impacted the way that you're approaching the training and workforce development that you're doing? Have you implemented similar structure into some of your training programs, or what does that look like?
Sure. So, I mean, you said the word many times. Maybe we'll switch from spectrum to structure. So obviously the Air Force instills, understanding, discipline, structure, and the importance of sort of leveraging individuals' strengths as a team, right? So my autism experience provides perspective, and a unique lens for understanding those needs and potential of neurodivergent individuals. So obviously this informs our training programs. I mean, we specifically and intentionally designed them to be accessible, supportive, and tailored to a wide variety of learning styles, right? So we emphasize, because these are things that need to be emphasized specifically in this field. Focus on individual strengths. That's huge, especially with this population or any population, honestly. What's really interesting, just a slight aside, neurodiversity programs, if followed by employers, literally opens up every other demographic to want to work at that organization. Why? Because you're focusing on individual strengths, you're emphasizing clear communication, defined roles. These are things that like everyone wants, not just neurodiverse people. Like everyone would love that. Being supported, clear communication, focus on your strengths. Yeah, sign me up. I want to work for that company, regardless if they're also working with people that are highly underrepresented. So that's a big one. So I think the mixing and meshing of autism and being a veteran, I think lends itself very interestingly, that structure again. We built our program around having that structure. And look, it didn't just poof, like magically appear. There's a lot of trial of error, a lot of failure, a lot of things, but we've been doing it 6 years now. So we've kind of narrowed it down to be like, I think this works. We still have challenges, and I'm sure we'll talk about those. But I think specifically reaching out to this community and letting them know that, look, this is an area, this is an industry, which is very transliterate, very multidisciplinary, that will accept you and needs you different, right? The industry is only at like 5 to 6%. I say it's one up from 3 a couple years ago, but of its total potential, right? Total potential. That means we need people that think differently to keep raising that bar, right? We need that, right? We need people that think differently. If all of us stodgy people, I saw that we've got Michael Hill. Look, we're the old people of this industry. Like we have our unique experiences, which are very valuable. But what we need is we need fresh mindsets. We need fresh perspective, new ways of thinking. We need that. Every industry needs that. Let me be clear.
Absolutely. It's a great point. And I've been talking to workforce leaders on this show from a number of different industries that utilize some form of skilled workers, and I hate the name, but I love the space of, they call it middle skills, which we've got to have a better name. This is like the type of name that is why nobody wants to go into these jobs, because who wants to be middle skilled? It sounds like you're not neither here nor there. Yeah. Middle management, middle school, like none of it sounds good.
Yeah.
So, but it's that idea that, it's a type of career where you need more than high school in most cases, unless you go to a really strong technical high school, and less than a 4-year degree, and you can have a robust career. And there's a huge amount of jobs to be had in that space, and it's an area that I'm really passionate about opening up and illuminating for people and saying, hey, this is a space you should be checking out. And there's a lot of workforce leaders in that space that are saying, red alert, we have 25 to 50% of our workforce that's retiring in the next 5 years, and we don't have anybody coming behind them. And, how are we gonna keep all of these critical industries going, and then you have new ones, which drones are not new, but like you said, if only 5% of the total potential of that industry has been realized, I feel like it is an emerging field in what it is capable of. And so there's even new frontiers being explored, I guess you could say. And you're right, we do need folks. And it's interesting because I feel like retention is such a interesting challenge right now for companies. And I think there's this sense of a lack of loyalty on both sides a little bit. And in, like, young people looking for jobs, I think don't totally know what to look for, and companies don't totally know what to offer. this very interesting space. But I'd love for you to, speak a little bit more about what you were just saying in terms of, as companies make room for folks that, may process a little bit differently and maybe provide some of those supports, focus on individual strengths, that actually creates opportunities for many more high performers to be drawn to that environment and potentially want to stay there for longer. Can you speak a little bit more about companies that you've seen do that successfully and kind of what that actually looks like being practically implemented?
Sure. So I'm going to go outside of the drone industry for this one. We
Yeah,
recently
absolutely.
just partnered with Neurodiversity Training Institute. What they do is they're kind of staff augmentation for neurodiverse, specifically for neurodiverse talent.
Hmm.
They partnered with a mortgage company. Now, one thing you may not know, I'm literally in the process of buying a house. So this is hitting home for me right now. There is still someone, a person, a physical being that has to review line by line, word by word, every mortgage application, all of the disclosures. Someone has to physically read them all, right? That is actually still a job that is critical and crucial because it's a big deal, right? We're talking hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. So this company was struggling, keeping people, retaining people in that role.
Mm.
Right? There was no amount of pizzas or access to fizzy drinks or whatever.
Right.
To keep them more in that job more than 6 months. It just drove them nuts. Now, partnering with Neurodiversity Training Institute, remember earlier in the conversation that attention to detail that I'll bring it back to my story. They were able to put some autistic, neurodiverse, hire some staff augmentees that were neurodiverse into that role. Not only did they love it because it was structured, it was repetitive, it was something that they could count on, they could schedule, they can create games around it, right? It's like, I can do 6 of these, or I can do 5, or like, right? I mean, so like, the thing that's interesting, and I'll tie that to me, like those people have now been there years and they don't want to leave that job. They want to keep doing it. Why? Because it is well within not just their wheelhouse. That structure drives them. It drives them, right? They don't want to go to this meeting and that meeting and do that. When you meet neurodiverse people, especially with autism, like, look, this is why a lot of them aren't very successful in college, and those that they fake it really well. They only want to do well in the subjects, or even go to the subjects that they're interested in. All the rest of them, they would rather not. And most of them don't do very well. So for me, the way I tie this back in, so I'm a remote sensing and GIS scientist. I still love those jobs that are like tech level, like tech 1 level jobs where I'm like digitizing, filtering, basic GIS 101. I still love that stuff. I volunteer. Like I volunteer to do that stuff for free. Like I work with many organizations that like we support FEMA. It's part of GIS Core. We do it's called NAPS for G. We do it's basically we provide the dashboard of taking all the images that show up on social media that around a hurricane, a tornado, a flood, something like that, and we geolocate them because typically that's not something that's geolocated. Someone just pops a picture. Twitter or X or whatever, or Instagram, they all strip the geolocation information. So we literally take cues from the image and like we see a street sign. Ooh, that looks like that over there. And we'll literally plot that on a map. I will get lost in that stuff for hours.
That's amazing.
Example, right? So like there's a lot of different ways that if you can find that area of interest, that hyper focus area, if you can find that for an individual and match them with mentors and match them with job shadowing and match them with an employer that understands all of that, you're gonna have a home run. Microsoft knows it. Defense, the NGA knows it, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. They have a neurodiversity hiring program. Ernst & Young. These companies, and I'm not talking about just tech stuff. Like they're creative. There are things that like need repetition, need different ways of thinking that allow them to thrive. And then I'm sure we'll get to this later, but like then there's very little that the employer has to do to ensure their success.
Right.
They just provide a supportive environment. That's all. Simple.
That's amazing. I know we talked about a story. I think that you mentioned that we have something similar on our side. I read a story a few years ago about, I think in the IDF, I was telling you this on our call before the show, one of the high level generals or something along those lines had a son who was autistic, and they have national military service. It's like a huge part of the culture there to serve, and his son wasn't able to serve, or wasn't considered able to serve in the typical military way that you would, just going into the army, doing something front lines. And he discovered, I'm assuming through finding what his son's high areas of focus were, that he was fantastic at reading these like super grainy satellite images or like radar type of things, where you're basically looking at a screen of static and you have to be able to like pick out stuff from that and recognize what it is and speak about it, be able to point out like, hey, this is actually a problem. And he was like phenomenal at it. And it was the thing that was like such a high level important thing. They would always take like students from the top of the class in whatever their upcoming officer training or whatever was. Their top of the class students would get assigned there because it was so important. And they would only stay, like you were saying, for 6 months because they wanted to go on to something else. And they, were able to create a special program to bring some of these autistic kids into that really enjoyed it, were better at it than anybody else, because they could just zone in on this screen and, like you were saying, maybe gamify it for themselves a little bit, or figure out a way to really own it and master that skill. And then they just wanted to stay in it forever because they loved it. And they were able to have like meaningful careers, but also do something that was like profoundly important and serve the country and serve national security, and actually created a lot of stability for them, but also for the country, So that's the thing. Like, you can have some very, very, like you were saying, it doesn't have to only be tier 1 work. Sometimes this can be like very high level, extremely important work that they just happen to be specifically good at, which is very interesting to think about. I want to transition a little bit because I know, and you've mentioned it, that like your background obviously in this neurodiversity space, but you're also a veteran. I'm not a veteran, but do a lot of work with veterans and care about that topic. And I always try to spend a little bit of time on the show, if possible, talking about like opportunities for veterans in these different spaces. So I know everyone says, like, what are the benefits of hiring veterans? And everybody says discipline and showing up for work on time and, knowing how to think critically and some of those things. But what do you feel like, from your perspective, again, veterans are not a monolith, but some of those core skills that a lot of veterans might bring to the table that are immediately transferable specifically to the drone space? Because I don't think a lot of veterans know to look at the drone space for opportunities. So where should they be thinking or looking if there's veterans transitioning, they're interested in this space? And
Absolutely.
what can they bring, what can they bring to the table?
Great question. So look, veterans will bring a wealth of transferable skills, like strong work ethic, leadership experience, ability to work effectively under pressure. Like, their training is already, a lot of them already in like situational awareness, risk assessment, technical proficiency. That makes them well suited for operations, regulatory, understanding SOPs, understanding safety culture, all of these things. This is what the aviation space, the drone analytics space, the operation space, it's what it's designed around. The most successful enterprises that I've seen that have went forward, like I just did an interview with the lead of Verizon's drone program. He was a CM5 in the Army, was a Black Hawk guy, and he leads that program. He has over 200, 250 different drone pilots that he manages at Verizon, and he runs it like a military organization because that's in an operational standpoint, that's very effective, right? They have their own certification. They have their own proficiencies. They have their own demonstrable things that they have to understand that are on a periodic review. Like, these are all things that a lot of people, when they're getting into this industry, don't know. Veterans do. They get it. They're like, yep, this is going to be part of it. A successful organization. Now, that on the contrary, when veterans get into organizations that don't do those things, there's an opportunity for them to bring that. So I would say that's definitely an opportunity for veterans. Or they walk. They're like, this isn't going to work. And they're right.
That makes a ton of sense. And I like the way that you pointed that out. I feel like so many veterans I've talked to are like, I came into this space, they didn't have any SOPs, so I just started making it for them. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. So you gotta roll with the culture there to some degree, but it is a real strength. I think that a lot of veterans bring is understanding it's important to have standardized procedures and understand how they work. And especially in a highly regulated, structured, again, safety focused area like drones, it's going to be so important to have those things. Where do you think the biggest demand is right now for talent in the drone space? Like, if someone generally is listening, whether they're from the neurodivergent background, veterans, or anyone else, if they're like, I want to get into the drone industry, but I have no idea where to look or where the demand is, what do you think people should check out? Is it like on the mechanical side, on the administrative side, the operations side? What do you see as like places for opportunity?
Another great question. So look, the demand for drone talent, it's growing. Various sectors, infrastructure, agriculture, public safety, construction, just to name a few. You literally could
Utilities.
you couldn't name an industry today that isn't using drones in some way. So if you're interested, you have to obtain your FAA Part 107 remote pilot certificate. Start there. It's not hard. 60 questions, multiple choice. My wife just got hers. She studied for 3 days. We've had students start our program in 2 weeks. They had it from zero to certification in 2 weeks. This is not a hard thing. Now, that's a challenge and an opportunity because it certifies you. It's a certificate. It doesn't actually certify you. You're certificated. You're a rated aviator, right? But you've had no hands-on experience. You're not qualified to do anything. So the next step is you got to seek out training programs that provide hands-on experience and industry-specific knowledge. Because one thing about the drone industry that's slightly controversial is it's a lot of jack of all trades. A lot of those people and programs aren't very successful because they don't support an industry with this tool set, with this skill set of using this tool. Like, it's kind of like you're a welder. Okay, cool. Welding, plumbing, but of what? Like, what's your job? Like, yes, you're a welder, but what do you make? What do you create? Like my dad was a welder. Like, he worked in the Navy in Groton, Connecticut, on submarines, but he also, worked on ambulances. It's like, it changed. That industry specific knowledge changed depending on what he was building, what he was welding. Same thing for drone pilots. Are you working within the construction space? Are you working with a public safety organization? What is your interest area? So that's why hands-on experience, job shadowing, things like that, super important. So you can understand what you're into. What do you want to learn more in? What do you want to go deep in? Because the people that stay super shallow aren't successful. Period. End of story. You can argue with me. It's a hill I'll die on. The ones that go deeper into understanding specific industries and then work backwards to the tool sets that they need to bring to the job, they're winning every day.
Interesting. Do you think if let's say you're a veteran or you're an active duty military member, hey, I have a year, I have 6 months till I transition out. I keep hearing things about drones. I kind of want to get into this. What do you think practically getting your Part 107, if you can? I mean, I know there's testing sites on some of the bases and some of the base testing centers for Part 107 you can go to, and sometimes I think it's free or not super expensive. So there's a lot of resources, I think, within the military to be able to get Part 107 specifically. But besides that, how would you approach thinking about that? Like taking your specific set of skills and interests, are you looking at like how are drones, let's say agriculture, you're really passionate about that, but you don't necessarily want to have a farm, but you think it's really important. How would you approach figuring out how you could get into drones related to like that industry? Like, how would you think about it? Does that question make sense?
It does. I would find a mentor. Like I would,
Okay.
so I would do two things. One, I would, after I had my 107, a lot of people are like, okay, now what? Great question. Find a mentor, network, understand what's happening, volunteer to go on some jobs. You're like, hey, look, don't have to pay me. I just want to show up and see what you do. Right. And if I can be helpful, great. Like a lot of people that I've brought out into the field all over the country, I do end up paying them. However, they're just there for the experience to understand what is the workflow and be like, ooh, this is something I really want to do, or wow, I never want to do this again. It's important to no, that's real though. That's real. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Jobs where it's like, there's no freaking way anyone would choose to do this on purpose.
Right. No, I think that's why job shadowing is so critical. I wish we did more of it because I've certainly been in environments where I was like, I absolutely could not work in this every single day. And other things, that I'm like, this is amazing. I would totally do this all the time, and you can't really know that till you're there.
It's true. The second part of that is building foundational knowledge in that area that you've now sort of cherry picked for yourself. What does that mean? Understanding, look, if I'm going to be doing solar, cool. Well, I'm going to want to know a lot about the solar industry. I want to know about how it's sited, how it's planned, how it's constructed, how like in basic, right? Now that you can stay shallow there, but where you don't go shallow in is how your tools can be applied in that environment. So I'm going to want to understand probably more in depth about thermography, probably more in depth about, working in some of those environments. I probably need specific certifications. I probably need specific training. I probably have, more things that I need to understand, more tools that I got to bring to be successful in that environment. So you won't know what those things are until you've shadowed that job with someone that knows what they're doing. And that's what they've chosen. So you're almost like an apprentice. And FYI, so I'll state this, I didn't state it earlier. Neurodiversity Works is a VA approved school. We're a VA approved school, and we have a registered apprenticeship program, which allowed us to become a VA approved school.
Right.
So our work process of building off and sort of signing off on skill sets of those tools is what it's based on. Right. So that is a mindset shift that is not necessarily what's happening in universities, not what's happening in community colleges. We're looking at it literally as a skilled trade, and that is how we are structuring our program.
That's amazing. And if someone was going through your program, is it specifically geared around drone piloting, or like what is the actual, like, because I know registered apprenticeships are built around occupations, like what is the occupation that you're skilling them for?
Super fun. Wow. So there really isn't one yet. There is no ONET code for drone pilot. Doesn't exist. So we are robotics technologist.
Okay.
What's the closest thing that we could find that had an ONET code that made any sense whatsoever?
Yeah.
What does that mean? So within the drone industry, we are focusing on operations. We're focusing on aviation safety, workplace safety, cybersecurity, and then we dive into the analytics part. The analytics part covers different modalities of data collection, multispectral, hyperspectral, thermography, LiDAR. And then we talk about specific applications and use cases within industries of those modalities. And then we provide a little bit of we have a summer camp. Now that's specifically for Neurodiverse, but like we offer workshops where we get completely hands-on. Like, hey, you want to see what the construction industry is doing with LiDAR? Okay. We have a pre-canned workshop that we can come to sites and we can invite people into that showcases. Now it's online and it can be in person. So like we do both.
Nice.
And we have a few of those. Our overall goal is to get candidates that want to understand what's available and what they're interested in and where they want to like double click on to learn more.
Right. Okay. And for folks, because it's interesting you mentioned so many different avenues there, because I think, when you think about people coming out of the military, a lot of the work that I do is in that registered apprenticeship space. So I'm very familiar, but more on the skilled side. So, people that'll have a mechanic background or, let's say avionics, I've heard translates super well into drone maintenance. But you've also got people who have safety backgrounds, inspection, compliance, quality, data analytics. I mean, a lot of folks transitioning out of the military want to get into data analytics and don't know how to start. So that, once you collect all of that data, what are you doing with it? Like, that's a whole, and the security around all of that data. So there's a lot of really interesting avenues. I think that's one reason why I'm so interested and excited about the drone space is there's just so many different avenues I feel like that people can explore. We probably need to wind down our conversation. We're going a little long, and I feel like we could probably go for another 2 hours on this. But what do you feel like? Because obviously we're talking about and referencing things about the drone industry that are coming. I mean, you made a pretty provocative statement at the beginning saying you think we're only 5% of the potential of this industry is realized. So what are you excited about, about the drone industry in the next 3 to 5 years or even longer? Like what makes you feel so, what's made you like invest so much in this industry, and what do you think it's coming that people maybe aren't even thinking about yet that's going to be exciting?
Whew, wow. Okay,
I
I'll try
asked
to
too
be
many
very
questions there,
succinct.
so
No, it's
yeah.
fair. So look, I'm excited. Like drone technology is being increasingly integrated into various industries. Why? Efficiency, safety, innovation, time savings, dull, dirty, dangerous work that keeps, saves lives, right? I believe that the public would be surprised by the advancements in drone technology, like autonomous flight capabilities, advanced airspace mobility, advanced data analytics, and like how drones are being used in all of these different areas. The thing that is going to be interesting, and I think one of the things that may surprise the general public is it's not going to be a sky full of drones, right? That's not the goal. The goal is with any successful technology, the goal of the technology is to disappear. The drone industry has won
Interesting.
when the drone as a tool is no longer the conversation. Nobody cares. Cool. Yeah. Obviously, they're using drones. Duh. When it disappears, think about smartphones. Think about
right.
the web. Think about any successful technology in the past and in the future. You win when it's ubiquitous and it doesn't matter anymore. And what I mean by that, it's like it's disappeared. Like it's now just built into the fabric of our world. I think that is what's happening in a lot of different areas already. That's just going to increase, expand. That level of integration is going to increase, right? So less and less people talking about, look what my cool drone can do. More and more people are going to focus about, look at the effect this has had on conservation efforts. Look at the effect this has had on our public safety program. Look at the effect, the millions we have saved in our utility program. Now, you can back in and be like, well, how was that? Well, it's an entire program that was built around drone or robotics technology, but that wasn't the thing. It was the entire program. It's a tiny cog in that wheel. And I think when people start to understand that, the use cases start to bloom and they understand. So it's less focused on the tool. It's more focused on the outcome.
I think that's such a powerful way to think about it. And unfortunately, it probably is where we have to land the drone of the conversation. I would love to continue talking about this with you. It's such an interesting topic. Hopefully we can find another time to chat. But in the meantime, thank you so much for coming on the show. And we had so many I'll throw a couple of these comments up here really quickly that I thought were great. You know, there are definitely a lot of very high performing folks in the neurodivergent community. This, I think, was in reference to you saying when you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. So, and I don't know what GeoGuessr is, but someone thinks you would be great at it. So
I do have it on my phone.
okay, perfect. Awesome. Well, Jason, this was so great. Thank you so much for taking the time to share a portion of your knowledge and expertise with us, and hopefully we can talk again sometime soon. If anyone's interested in finding neurodiversity works or any of your stuff, where should they look for that?
Yeah, so you can always find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to find me and all the different things that I have going on, the different hats. But you can also find us at neurodiversityworks.org. So one word, neurodiversityworks.org. You can see what we're up to, what we've done, where we're headed. And yeah, Emily, thank you so much for having this conversation. I think it's important, and it was awesome being on your show. So thank you.
Thanks, Jason.